Our next speaker is John Stoner. Mr. Stoner has over 20 years of experience in the intelligence and national security community, with 10 years of experience in cybersecurity. He's currently a cyber threat intelligence analyst at Khaki International. He has experience with signals intelligence, instructional design, teaching, cyber counterintelligence, and advanced persistent threat analysis. He holds numerous cyber certifications, presenting Transition to Cybersecurity, a primer of resources. John Stoner.
All right, so I'm going to cover a number of different topics today, and to be honest, many of these topics could be their own entire presentation. So if anyone does have questions for me later, I'm available on Slack and Twitter and all the places. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My employers have no responsibility for anything I say. I am doing this in my own personal capacity. You've already gotten the short intro on me, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Besides cyber, I'm a gamer and I am heavily involved in soccer. So this is kind of our agenda today. So we'll talk a little bit about job searching, some resume advice, a little bit about cybersecurity as a career field or InfoSec. I have a little bit of advice about trying to find your first job if you're transitioning into cybersecurity, and then hopefully leave a few minutes for some questions. And as I said, a lot of these individual topics, I could probably talk for an hour on their own. I'm really passionate about a lot of these things, and I've really been diving into the InfoSec community to try to help and give back. So we will kick things off. So first of all, job searching tips. So I've mentored probably a couple dozen people, many junior, but some mid-career, and a lot of them say they're interested in a job in cybersecurity. And that's great because we need everybody in cybersecurity. But that doesn't actually tell me a whole lot because there's more than 50 types of jobs or specializations within cybersecurity. I always use a medical analogy when I explain to people who are not in this field. You know, you can tell me that you want to be in the medical field, but that doesn't tell me, do you want to be a nurse, an EMT, work in medical billing, be a lawyer, HIPAA compliance, neurosurgeon, right? And cybersecurity is pretty much the same way. It's a very broad field and it offers a lot of flexibility. So as you are thinking about getting into cybersecurity or moving within the field, you're going to want to do a number of different things, including research. So you're going to want to do some research on what do you want to do within cybersecurity. And that in and of itself, you may want some mentorship to help you narrow that down. There's a lot of resources out there to help you understand the different areas of specialization and focus within cybersecurity as a field. This might be different depending if you were a junior person getting out with a couple of years or whether you're retiring. I was actually just mentoring a Marine major who's sort of planning her transition in a couple of years, and what she wants to do might be a little bit different than someone who definitely wants to be a practitioner and have hands-on keyboard. And the InfoSec field, cybersecurity, has a lot of flexibility, and we kind of talked on that in the talk before this from Jax, which was amazing, by the way. She covered a lot of stuff that I totally 100% agree with, is that your first job and your second job and your third job, there's a lot of room to change jobs and pivots. It really took me, I got out in the Army in 2010, and it took me a long time to figure out cyber threat intelligence was where I wanted to be. And then it took me some time to find jobs within cyber threat intelligence. And I've been with CACI International for only 3 months because I just left my GS-14 government position because it wasn't exactly on the career roadmap that I decided was making me happy. There's a lot of flexibility in this field. When you're first starting out from a transitional standpoint, though, it helps to narrow down your focus because there's too much education, there's too many certifications, there's too many specialities within cybersecurity to approach it in that very broad mindset. And then further, something you should consider and think about are the different industry segments within all of this, because commercial cyber threat intelligence is a little bit different than what I do for cyber threat intelligence for a federal cyber center within the space of national security. They're similar, but they're not 100% the same. So even within the CTI specialization, there's a little bit of a difference. A lot of veterans that I talk to, I don't think have really considered the differences, because there's pros and cons, but just differences between working in the commercial state versus working in DoD or DoD contracting versus a government or state position as well. Like North Dakota is off the chain on what they are doing on cybersecurity. We actually had their CIO come in and speak at one of our big events. So there's a lot of really interesting state and federal positions as well that might not be obvious to you. And one of the other things that I want to just, for veterans, I think this is pretty interesting, because when we're in the Army or the military, I was in the Army, we're kind of doing what we're expected to do, right? So it may not be something that we love, right? I mean, hopefully you don't hate your job in the military. That does happen, and people get out or transition MOSs. But this quote from my father when I was a teenager has really stuck with me for a long time about, success is doing more of what you like and less of what you don't like. And I could have a whole topic also about chasing the money. There's definitely some people who enter cybersecurity chasing salaries and chasing money, and there's some dangers with that. If you have questions about that, we can definitely have conversations about that. But a lot of people are like, I want to be a CISO. And there was an interesting talk at BSides Boston from an amazing presenter. I'm bad with names. And he said a lot of the CISO, a lot of the people that want to be a CISO he talks to say they want to be a CISO because of the money. I will tell you that there are really good salaries to be had across all of the specializations within cybersecurity. Okay, so I would be cautious of pursuing a specialization because you think that that is going to bring you happiness and satisfaction because of money. Yes, I think you have to have a certain level of money to be happy, but that is not the end all and be all. Resume assistance. All right. Just in VetSec in the Slack yesterday, somebody posted their resume, and I could tell immediately that they had one resume, and that was the one resume that they were sending to any cybersecurity job. All right, so I will tell you right now, having worked a number of events with recruiters and DEFCON Career Village, I have been changing slides. Are the slides not changing? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, we see the main screen of your PowerPoint in edit mode. Yeah, now we see resume assistant.
I'm just gonna leave it like this then. Can everyone see that at least? It's not full screen, but hopefully that's good.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, I'm just sorry about that, everyone. Technical difficulties. So this was the job searching tip slide, just so you kind of get an idea. And then this is my resume assistant slide. So in the resume assistance, one of the critical things, especially as you transition, is that as you narrow down a specialization, and it doesn't have to be one thing, but perhaps you've decided that you want to start out in a security operations center, or maybe doing some blue team work, or a cyber defense analyst, right? Those are very interrelatable fields. You would still have a different resume for those different jobs. So that's really critical. We want to customize your resume for the type of job. The other reason why we want to focus a little bit is because there's such a huge amount of training and certifications available. You can do some reconnaissance on the jobs that you might be interested in. So let's say that you think maybe I want to work in a security operations center, a SOC. Right, so you can go ahead and look at jobs in your area or where you might want to live, or remote jobs, and start going to all the job boards and also going to the company's websites where they list jobs, and do some reconnaissance. What are the job requirements that keep coming up across the different types of jobs? Do they keep talking about SIEMs, SIMs? Do they keep talking about specific SIMs? Are they looking for like the security plus come up frequently, right? Because if all of the SOC tier 1 and tier 2 jobs, say they need a security plus, well, maybe that's a certification that might be worth pursuing as opposed to network plus or opposed to CEH, right? So this is where you can start to also craft your resume and tailor your SMART goals that Jack's talked about into fields that you're interested in, tailored to what job requirements currently exist, right? And then you can, right, someone is like, there's a Udemy course, there might be a Cyber course on secure operations center, or the skills that are further listed and detailed in what they're looking for that role, right? And that's going to be different, right? It's going to be a lot different. Like if you want to be a cloud architect or help secure, cloud, Azure, AWS, right? Then you would do that for those job fields. So the other thing that I see, and veterans sometimes I think have this problem in particular, is that your resume is not an autobiography, right? So there is no golden rule on resume length. But you want to keep the resume short. And as someone who has done multiple hiring actions and has applied for a lot of roles as well, when you're hiring manager recruiter, you have very minimal time generally to look at all the resumes for a role. So recently, when I was hiring for federal government positions, we would have a job requirement, and after screening from the Air Force, we would still often have 60 to 80 resumes to screen for interviews. And I will tell you, I typically spent between 15 and 30 seconds on the first pass. So in that first 15 to 30 seconds, I'm trying to figure out, one, did this person even read the job requirement they applied for? And about 75% of the time, the answer was no. They just saw it was a particular type. It was a 2210 role for the government and applied, not understanding that we needed cyber threat intelligence. So when you're broadly applying, how can you stand out from the crowd? Well, one of that is customizing the resume to make sure it's applicable for the job. So clearly you've read the resume, you've tailored your resume for that particular billet that is open. There's some other things that you can do for free to help with this, because I think in my experience, a lot of people struggle with their resume. There are free resources available, and there's lots of them. I'm a big fan of the BSides cybersecurity conferences. BSides, like the B side of a record. So BSides Orlando is coming up. They're going to have a career village. I'll be there along with some recruiters. Clearjobs.com is sort of like a sponsor and heavily involved in that if you do have a clearance and want to work in that sort of a community. And there's a lot of other conferences and career villages where you can get free advice from either professionals like myself or from the actual recruiters that are trying to fill the roles. I am available on LinkedIn, and there's other people in the community that will help you with your resume. We won't write it for you, but I have some resources available. I have some templates available. I will give it to you straight. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I will just tell you where I think you need to make improvements. Because a lot of people really are still struggling with that resume, and it really is your first impression. The other thing is that the type of resume you're crafting is probably going to vary depending on the type of industry you're in. So a commercial resume may be shorter than your federal resume, right? There's a difference if you're going into USAJOBS and applying for DoD or government federal positions. There are some differences between what you want to do. I think even Jax mentioned in her talk, in the commercial space, we have a tendency to use similar jargon and acronyms and all the military language that we've grown up with. And that may not translate if you're trying to land, a commercial job with some small startup in Colorado that's not connected to the government. Right. So even that can vary. Whereas if you're applying to like a big defense contractor that has, 37% of veterans, like where I work, and it's a job with the DoD, then you might not need to tweak the resume as much. There might be a more natural fit, but it might not be where you want to work. So if you want to, do Silicon Valley startups, you're going to want to talk to people who work in that industry to make sure the resume is matching what that industry expects. And again, this is your first chance to get that recruiter to hopefully either give you the first call back or pass your resume on. Again, I could go on resumes for a long time. Also, please have someone check for grammar, spelling, and formatting. Remember, the resume doesn't get you the interview. The resume is getting you, the resume is only getting you the interview, right? It's not getting you the offer, right? Your resume is, there's lots of analogies to use. It's your eBay listing of what will get someone to click on you to call you back. So technical skills and specializations, we talked about this a little bit. So your education and training, which there's lots of different options for you, should match your desired field of work. So like if you want to work in cyber threat intel, right, there are sort of types of certifications and training that will translate into the work that we do in cyber threat intel. There's actually not as many certifications and harder qualifications for cyber threat intel. There's one SANS class, which is 4, 5, 7, 8 top, or mine was taught by Robert Lee, a former NSA analyst, and it's fantastic. But there's not a lot of other CompT and EC certifications that 100% relate to cyber threat intel. As opposed to if you want to start into vulnerability analysis and eventually get into red teaming, right? There's a lot of training and certifications. What there's not is direct undergraduate degrees. So I am someone who took 5 years to complete my 2-year degree, and I was teaching most of my cyber classes at UMUC in the online portion of the class, and I decided that was cool. I had enough. Education in whatever form works for you is critical. This is not a field where you learn some things and then are good for 10 years. And I think anybody that you talk to in this field, if you're the type of person that doesn't like continual education and learning, I'm going to recommend you think about some other fields, because whatever specialization you're in will require you to have continual education, even if it is as informal as staying on top of what's going on with your industry. And you're going to want to have a mentor with someone in the areas of cyber you work with. The other thing that I recommend to get rid of this, you have to have experience so I can get a job, but I don't have experience because I can't get a job situation, is volunteer. There's so much you can do in InfoSec to volunteer with organizations like VetSec or your local BSides or Women in Cybersecurity or, ISSA, et cetera, et cetera. And then that can be something you put onto your resume, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I have seen this presentation about different cybersecurity domains a number of times. A lot of people use this particular graphic, and it's a pretty good one. Because let's say you want to work in cyber because you know there's careers in cyber, but you're not that technical, right? So that's fine. There's so many like GRC, HIPAA compliant, CMMC, DoD 8570 requirement people auditing, right? There's a huge amount of policy required. If you're a policy wonk in the military and you're good at policy and you understand policy and you understand how it gets crafted in the US government at a federal level or at a state level, there's people for you. That's great, Jax. We need people who love policy. I'm not a policy person. But let's say maybe you love instructing. You really like being on platform, which I actually really love being an instructor too. There's so much work in this field for people who teach, from introductory level courses for people who are just getting started to the most advanced red team training courses with interactive VMs and that you can imagine. So again, there's even levels of sophistication just within the learning and development or just within the instructing and education line. Maybe you're in academia, right? I mean, there's jobs in academia focused on teaching cyber courses. Laws and policy, right? Maybe you're a lawyer in the military and you've already passed the bar exam and kind of know where you want to live maybe, and you're not huge into cyber. I would say study cyber and then become a cyber lawyer, because there are very few cyber specialty lawyers available, especially if you're coming in with even a secret clearance, right? That's a hot demand. So as you're thinking about transitioning or pivoting within the field, this helps because there's so much you can do in cybersecurity. And it may take a while for you to find your perfect fit. I briefly thought I wanted to be a penetration tester, and that was the road I was going down. And I realized it wasn't a great fit for me. It's just not something that was a natural fit for the skills and aptitude that I think that I bring to the table to the team. So it took me a little bit of a while to find cyber threat intel, but I struggle because I really like instructing as well. So let me talk about what you bring to the table, even if you don't have a technical background. Um, so these non-technical critical skills. So a lot of people in the military are coming in with these things that are important regardless of where you want to work in cybersecurity. So curiosity and initiative is going to be really important. That kind of ties into like root cause analysis, critical thinking, continual education and training, right? A lot of military specialties do require continual education and training, so that may come natural. Leadership and effective management. Boy, there is a path for you if you enjoy being in charge of teams, or at least you enjoy mostly being in charge of teams. Because those of us in the military, we have led all sorts of teams, multinational, coalition, international teams. We've had to lead people we don't like. We've had to lead people we do like. We've had to resolve conflicts with people we do like and resolve conflicts with people we don't like. And we've had crappy bosses and we've had good bosses. And so as you transition, if you think you want to be a management or leadership of other technical people, let me tell you, we're a tough bunch to manage, but we absolutely need really good leadership in all of the different specializations within cybersecurity. Active listening is a huge one. Emotional intelligence that Jack talked about is really often lacking. So there's a space if you really enjoy, that leadership bucket, managing teams. There's space for you. Project management is a big one. Get your PMP. All right, it's hard to manage these sorts of technical projects and deliver on time. Um, so here are my final bits of advice because I want to leave some time for questions as well. So you got a network, and I think everybody's going to talk about that. I think InfoSec Twitter is important. If you don't want to be on Twitter, just be on Twitter and basically make like a sock puppet account. Use some sort of crazy avatar. Don't use your real name and just lurk. You don't have to tweet, but it will at least also allow you to see what's going on and follow all the conferences and events. And then maybe you'll see that it's not so bad most of the time. I'm a big proponent of your local BSides conferences. LinkedIn. Uh, I would strongly suggest that you get a professional picture that's not of you in uniform. I see that very commonly, especially with junior folks. I work with some people who are now DoD contractors who still have a picture of them in uniform. I don't recommend that. You can make some business cards if post-COVID we're doing in-person events again. A lot of opportunities are about knowing the right people and having that broad network to help you understand those hidden opportunities, which has been talked about. The previous presentation talked about being informed, right? When you're going in for interviews, you can prepare for the interview. There's lots of YouTube videos and help on how to be successful at an interview. But like, let's say, Azure had a major outage yesterday and like just in chit chat that comes up and you don't know anything about this, makes me wonder if you're paying attention to the field. Yeah, a lot of senior officers using their DA photo. This talk is not for very senior officers. It is hard to have self-confidence, but that's where you work on your stories, right? In that interview, you want to practice the stories that promote you because you're promoting yourself once you get to the interview stage. Have multiple people look at the resume, have some mentors, ask for help practicing the interview. So I can't stress that enough because the interview is what's going to get you the offer. And you may not have every single thing the job description wants. And trust me, nobody has that. That job rec is a dream list, right? I mean, So if you think you have the majority of the skills for a job, apply and then practice your interview and have confidence about what you're bringing to the table, and be sure to craft your stories to highlight the competencies that you would bring to the job, understanding that every job we take is going to require a lot of learning once you take that job. So I think I'm right on time. So if anybody does have some questions, I can see the chat. I think these are all being recorded. I can make my contact information available to anybody that has follow-up questions as well.